We're on a little sooner than I anticipated, Charles, but how are you? It's always wild and woolly when I'm on the road in the car. Demolition Men. I wanted to play the that great song, Demolition Man, but we actually did Demolition Man once before with Joe Biden. But this is okay. Right. How are you, Charles?
I'm fine. I played a lot of tennis on Tuesday and was feeling a little jiggy the next day in my ankles and legs, but today I feel great. And it's a treat to be back here in Penang where things work very well. And I have a whole bunch of new appliances that I haven't used, and I got my maid to figure out how to use the washer and dryer, and pretty modern equipment, Electrolux versions that, when they're done in a cycle, they start singing to you to alert you that the thing is finished. It's kind of
very, very Asian. They love that. When I went to Korea even years ago, it was everywhere you went. The place was like a slot machine. But Charles, you're there in the presidential library, the Charles Ortel residential library. Excuse me.
The residential library.
But we've got to talk about this, Charles, because the Demolition Men. A lot of people seem to think that Putin created this war in Ukraine. What are we going to be discussing here today?
Well, the good news is I got up early and I checked, and actually Putin and Trump spoke for 70 minutes, which is good news. And on that call, there's a readout of it on Twitter from the Russian side, from the Russian embassy in the U.S., where the Russians claim that Trump said he did not know about these attacks in Ukraine. And on the one hand, that's reassuring. But on the other hand, how many other rogue operations set up by this piece of crap, Obama, and the team around him, how many rogue operations were set up to happen post Joe's departure at long last from pretending to work from the White House? How many other sinister operations are beyond the effective control of Donald Trump and his people? I mean, this is actually, I say this, I'll repeat myself, but if we were the government of Grenada in the Caribbean and our annual spending was, let's say, $50 million, maybe I'd understand this. But we're spending close to $10 trillion a year on government. And it's clear that the spending is completely out of control, that the swamp doesn't want to see it come under control. And now this criminal, I mean, people forget, Zelenskyy ran, he was an actor, a bad comedian and an actor with a popular show bankrolled by the thugs who've been stealing money from this war. He ran on a campaign of peace, that he was going to bring peace to Ukraine. The Kyiv government has been shelling Russian speakers in the eastern portion of its own country since 2014. So the civil strife that has been occurring inside Russia certainly goes to 2014. I believe, and others believe, that the Maidan Revolution was a ruse, likely a CIA plot. And if you go deeply into history, there are serious questions about the legitimacy of every Ukraine regime. And so if the shoe were on the other foot and China installed, which I guess it did install, an anti-American regime in Canada, and that regime started committing atrocities against conservatives in, let's say, Alberta, killing people, how long would we put up with that? And here's Putin putting up with it for, if you go back to 14, or about 11 years. And he has now reached the important conclusion that I think I reached, and you reached, and our viewers reached long ago. If you determine that the counterparty you're attempting to deal with is a terrorist, there's no point in negotiating. Because what that means is that the system of governance inside the country is broken. This is a country that has not held a legitimate election in years. The leader is governing using martial law. He's jailed his opponents. He's taking. We interviewed a brave legislator who was a critic of Zelenskyy, who's in jail, who was being represented, and I was dealing with the lawyers to set the thing up. And in retaliation, Zelenskyy hauled this guy's lawyers off to the front lines. This is a terrorist thug. And it's amazing to me that frankly Putin has been as patient as he seems to have been. Now, what just happened is apparently our State Department put up a warning that people in Kyiv in particular better be prepared for an escalation in attacks, signaling to me the obvious, but confirmation here that Russia is going to retaliate. And Medvedev is, I think, the former leader, is people say you can't really trust what he says, but he's very bellicose. And he's basically said, listen, the buildings that need to be blown up will be blown up. The people who need to be executed will be executed. And Putin has now given statements saying that Zelenskyy is a terrorist. Now, what does this mean for Mike Pompeo, somebody who on paper I was prepared to like, but who has covered himself in disgusting acts, both as CIA leader and Secretary of State, and now outside governance, taking on foreign clients, including, I think, one Ukrainian client. So what business did Mike Pompeo have landing in Ukraine with that idiot, Lindsey Graham, who's trying to see how many male escorts he can hire around the world? What business did the two of them have showing up in the middle of, we had negotiations going on in Istanbul, and Pompeo's there with Graham getting up and saying, listen, I have the votes with Blumenthal. There's support for more arms and against more arms for Ukraine and more sanctions against Russia. I mean, I'm sorry, Lindsey Graham, I want to understand how he makes his money, how he supports himself, and how he gets off inserting himself against the interests of the Trump administration at very delicate moments. I mean, Lindsey Graham is a traitor to the United States of America, as is Mike Pompeo. And so I hope the silence on Trump's part on these issues, it means that the long knives are being sharpened and that hundreds, if not thousands of people are going to be excised from the deep state, many of whom belong in jail.
It's pretty serious stuff, Charles. I mean, it's good to hear that Trump spent that time speaking with Putin, but, obviously it's a sensitive moment, so Putin's going to be, obviously wanting to speak to Trump if he wants to speak. But isn't it sort of sending a terrible signal that the United States is out of control if Trump admits that he didn't know about these attacks? I mean, it's better than saying that he knew about them, but it's not good.
It's not good, but what is interesting is that both sides characterized the 70-minute discussion as positive, and that it didn't just deal with Ukraine. They apparently Trump requested Putin's help in reaching an agreement with Iran, and they both supposedly discussed the long-term potential of improving U.S. and Russian ties. And on that, I look at the European Union. I haven't been to every country in Europe, but I've been to many of them, and some 100 times or more. And I have great affection for many of the original people in Europe, but Europe is a shithole. Western Europe is a shithole, thanks to leadership. No, a shithole. Under the quote leadership of, I married my mother, Macron, and this douche leader in Germany, and this idiot in the UK. I mean, it's just, there are bright spots now in Poland and in Hungary and Italy, but across the EU, you have a diseased carcass of a corpulent, deficit and debt-ridden bunch of failed states that rely on the United States for their peaceable existence. I think it is time for the United States to exit the UN, exit the EU. I mean, would cease dealing with the EU, and pick and choose from among the states that are out there those who cherish our core principles. Freedom of expression is a very important core principle, particularly with these looming censorship regimes, some coming from the US, many coming from Europe, and of course from China. Countries that censorship and wokeism and worship at the altar of climate delusions, these are not our friends. And we have limited resources. We need to pay down our debt. We need to get our spending at home under control. We have great opportunities to invest inside this country now under Trump. We need to clean up the judicial system. We got a lot of internal work to do. And as we look around the world, Russia is a country, great opportunities to invest inside this country now under Trump. We need to clean up the judicial system. We got a lot of set of sanctions is growing. Its people are united. It does. Is any if the United States and Russia were to improve relations to the point where we could trust one another to collaborate on important projects, that would be very good for the world. And as for these people, there was the leader of, I think, NATO got up there and it was talking like he was Adolf Hitler, saying that NATO is the most powerful military fighting force on earth and all this kind of stuff. No, it's not. Without the United States, NATO is a joke. And NATO is supposed to be a defensive organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it is time. Trump needs to open up that can of whoop ass. And I like the fact that there's some coordination meeting involving the parties that are helping Ukraine. And Hexas said, "Fuck you, I'm not going."
Whoa. Yeah, that is
the first time we've done that. But there needs to be these self-important, morons who don't have anything positive to offer anybody. They've never built a better mousetrap. They've never offered a better service. They never run a business. They have issues they care about. And the primary one is they hate Trump. These people need to be excised from government. We've got important issues to confront. We absolutely need to gain control of our southern border. We need to remove the cancer that infects our supposedly elite educational institutions. I love the fact that just the United States government has said that Columbia University has lost its accreditation to be a university. That's fantastic as far as I'm concerned. The next step would be for Columbia, which is one of the largest landowners in New York City, to start paying taxes, property taxes, on all its holdings at full assessed value.
But Charles, don't you expect that some judge will come and say, "Oh no, you can't do this"?
Jason?
Yes. Can you hear me? Charles? Charles, you got me? I can hear you.
Yeah, now I can hear. Yeah,
don't you think that some judge will come along and say, "Oh"?
I think the people are with Trump now watching this. There have been more nationwide injunctions now in less than a year under Trump than there were, I believe, under George W. Bush and Barack Obama combined. These Article 3 judges need to be taught a serious lesson, and as does the Supreme Court. John Roberts, I don't know what they have on him, but I think the Obamacare decision crafted by him was a piece of garbage. And people in the legal profession are too afraid, I think, because they want to keep the bar licenses and they want to have, still play with that corrupt system. They're too timid to go back over that Obamacare decision and realize that, of course, Obamacare was a tax. Of course it was. And of course it's unconstitutional. And of course that decision is horrible. And beyond that, of course, the Obamacare system, which has led to the present state in medicine where people are paying for insurance that is absurdly expensive. Time comes to get care. Instead of getting one empowered physician who really knows the patient, you have this litany of specialists who all have to look at you individually and don't consult with one another. And by the time the end rolls around, your care is 10 times as expensive as it should be. So the whole medical profession, Hillary Clinton was the first to try to destroy it. Thankfully, her healthcare plans, remember, her task force met in secret in violation of the laws, and her plan was ridiculous. But Obama's got across the line, and I want to understand what leverage the swamp has on Roberts. Nobody's talking enough about Robert's wife, who has a business on the side. How do you have the top, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, how do you have his wife in an active business at the same time with all these companies and interests that want to get on the right side of the Supreme Court? That just doesn't make sense to me. Roberts doesn't make sense to me. I think he's compromised. And I think it's time. Trump only has 3+ years left, assuming he stays alive. It is time for us, instead of fighting foreign wars, we need to understand that we have dread enemies. I mean, Harvard, think of the cheek of that piece of garbage campus, which apparently has many, many daughters and sons of communist Chinese elites at Harvard. Think of the nerve of Harvard deciding that their commencement speaker is going to be a Chinese communist puke who is going to thumb her nose in the speech at Trump. Think of the nerve of that.
Yeah.
I think Trump, and I was supposed to be at my 45th business school reunion is next weekend. I'm not going to go, obviously, but and they're asking me for money on a daily basis. I mean, the nerve of these places. Trump needs to get big ass fucking hammers. Big ass. Mike Pompeo, when he returns to the United States, he needs to have the shit scared out of him. Remember, I guess his replacement, Gina Haspel was the station chief in the UK. Boris Johnson was working with Obama and others to make sure that Hillary Clinton got elected. Why were they doing that? Because the UK, in my opinion, because the UK and many other foreign actors saw in George W. Bush an opportunity to erect ungovernable deep state. Nations would collaborate, and the UK would do actions against Americans that the American government couldn't do legally, and vice versa. And this is a process that's been going on now for decades. Many are implicated in both parties.
It's very serious, Charles. I mean, we're going to have to see what happens. Now, so these guys are still in Ukraine. How do we know that Russia won't blow them up?
Well, I think they've left Ukraine, but the point is when they come back. I mean, Lindsey Graham, I personally watched him remind people that he was showed up at dinner at 6:30 on a weeknight, drunk. That's really bad. If you're just a human being, to be drunk at 6:30 in front of strangers, high-powered strangers, forgetting me, in an intimate setting where you can't hide. And then Morgan Ortegas was the speaker. She's a very interesting person, and she gave a talk about what she wanted to accomplish in life and what Trump might do. And at the end of it, Graham, who was just there, happened to be, walked in with her. Said, I think I should make a few comments and answer some questions. So he answered questions, slurring his words. And at the end of it, he said, I just have one final thought. Bomb, 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 bomb Iran. And he laughed maniacally. I mean, this is a man who shouldn't hold a security clearance. And he's needlessly prolonged. You see these videos on my Twitter feed and X feed, whatever, and others. Ukrainian thugs are taking people off the streets with no training, putting them in the middle, facing the Russian spear, and then if they are afraid or whatever, they're shooting their own people. I just watched an execution by Ukrainians of 3 conscripts, and we're supporting this. And Lindsey Graham supporting this. This man should never serve in government again. He should have his pension stripped. If he's taking money, which I suspect he is, one way or another, he needs to, get the Menendez treatment, and he needs to go to the kind of jail he won't enjoy. Maybe put him in with a bunch of women. Not that I have strong views.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, I agree with you, Charles. It's unbelievable. Steve Bannon was saying, Lindsey Graham. I don't know why he wasn't more specifics. Steve Graham said Lindsey Graham should be put in jail for stirring it up in Ukraine. I mean, isn't he violating the Logan Act to go there and walk around like he's the Secretary of State or the President or something like that?
Well, I mean, he effectively threatened Trump. Trotting out that stolen valor douchebag, Blumenthal from Connecticut, this is a man who lied about serving in Vietnam and was caught, right? And he gets, and the two of them, echoing McCain, McCain used to go around with a Democrat as well on foreign policy missions, but going in the middle of this and suggesting that, flat out stating that they have the votes to give Ukraine the weapons, and more money, and and Trump better understand that. I mean, Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal were threatening Trump in the middle as peace negotiations were taking place in Istanbul, and knowing probably that the Ukrainian thugs were about to launch deep incursions into Russia. Okay, this is supposed to be, Americans reluctantly signed on for a defensive operation in which no American personnel would be involved. There's no way that strike occurred inside Russia without some help from foreign parties. It may not have been the US, it may have been the UK, but there's no way these bumbleheads in Kyiv pulled that off alone. No way.
Yeah, I mean, they're also saying they used POV drones. So I saw an image that looked like kind of I don't know if this was the actual drone, but it was a very improvised, sort of a multi-rotor thing with a bomb strapped to it. I mean, it almost just looked like a DJI drone. It's very difficult to understand how Russia doesn't have countermeasures to stop something like that.
Cutting out, Jason.
Sorry, Charles. I ran out of time to get the whole satellite thing going, so I'm just going by cellular right now. But I'm just saying it's difficult to understand how this drone attack couldn't be thwarted. And the thing that upsets me is that now I'm seeing a lot of reports that are saying like, oh, the United States is also vulnerable to these drone attacks. And I saw an interview with Palmer Luckey last night where he's talking about, how Anduril has all this counter drone technology. And it always just makes me wonder, was this attack not done to just get people super scared of the idea of drones so that Anduril can now sell billions of dollars worth of counter UAS? I'm not saying we don't need counter UAS technology, but just even in this interview on a show called Moonshots, where I've seen Palmer Luckey many times, he just loves to say things that are, in my view, not true about this war in Ukraine. And I think it's very self-serving. He's interested in selling military equipment. I think there's a component of that still going on.
I think that's right. And then the other question, and I think we should be alarmed about it, our borders were open for 4 years under AutoPen and the administration of liars. Now, deeply stuck into the administration of liars was Anita Dunn, who is married to Bob Bauer, the former White House counsel under Obama, who resigned mysteriously the instant he announced his resignation, the instant those lawyers came back from getting a physical copy of the birth certificate with an electronic copy. He resigns immediately. And his wife had to leave the Obama administration because some tape emerged of her praising Mao Zedong as one of her idols, that murderous thug. And by the way, where you are, this is now the 30-year anniversary of Tiananmen Square. So under Biden, we had a president and his family who were linked up to $1 billion fund. Hunter Biden and his partners got $1 billion commitment from an entity based in and linked to the Communist Party of China. and they were going around putting together business deals. Hunter was flying around on Air Force One, and Hunter was, in the White House as the Communist Chinese were sending more and more spies into Harvard and other universities, sending fentanyl across our lines. And now the CCP is in its death throes. I mean, the economy is not doing well. People are very upset with Xi. There are credible reports coming out of China by people like Gordon Chang and others, and I know Gordon has an agenda, but I support his agenda, suggesting that China has some severe internal economic and political problems, which are compounded by their aggressions around the world geopolitically. And no one put the dots together in the journalism, in legacy media field under Biden. They signed off. Bill Clinton last week or maybe earlier this week, was out on the airwaves saying, no, Biden was sharp as a tack.
Bill Clinton seems like he's losing his mind
now. China.
Now, Charles, we're just about at the end of our. I don't know if you can you hear me there, Charles? We've just about run out of time here. We're going to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum and continue the conversation. People can join us there on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Also on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. We're still waiting for Odyssey to reestablish a payment system. People who subscribe to me on X at JG_CSTT. They're also going to be able to get the sponsor exclusive broadcast. We've got to talk, Charles, about Karine Jean-Pierre. She's going to be leaving the broken Democrat Party. I don't know if people really care what she does, but she's writing a book. Probably it'll be a cartoon coloring book because she's pretty stupid. We'll be back